When we speak of religion, the mind typically conjures up grand temples, divine scriptures, immutable beliefs, and sacred rituals carried out with utmost reverence. Religion, in its common understanding, implies adherence to supernatural concepts like God, heaven, or the promise of eternal salvation. These elements are seen as central to the religious path. But what if a system of thought that appears to be a religion in form is not actually a religion in substance? This is precisely the paradox Buddhism presents. It is often described as a religion, yet at its core, it challenges the very foundations of what we conventionally label as religious. Why is Buddhism considered a religion that is not a religion? The answer lies in its distinctive absence of the traditional components found in most organized faiths. The Buddha did not establish a rigid belief system for followers to obey. He did not declare the existence of a supreme deity, nor did he offer comforting visions of paradise as a reward for faith. Rather, Buddhism urges individuals to look within themselves, to investigate their own minds, and to see clearly the nature of suffering and liberation through personal experience, not through blind faith. Where many religions insist that belief must precede understanding, have faith and you shall see, the Buddha turned this model upside down. He encouraged personal inquiry. See for yourself, and then you will understand. He spoke not of distant heavens or mystical saviors, but of observable truths, how the mind works, how suffering arises, how awareness can free us. The truth in the Buddhist view is not something external that can be passed from teacher to student like a gift. It is something that must be directly realized through one's own mindfulness and insight. This makes Buddhism not only deeply personal, but also extremely challenging. It does not offer easy answers or comforting certainties. It asks each of us to walk our own path, to observe, question, and understand. There are no shortcuts and no guarantees. Truth in Buddhism is not a divine revelation, but a lived experience that unfolds in daily awareness. And for that reason, it's not dogmatic, but liberating. It opens a door to inner freedom and self-mastery. If you are seeking a sanctuary where life's mysteries are already solved, where definitive answers to existence are provided and reinforced by rituals and doctrine, Buddhism may feel unsettling. But if you are curious to question deeply, to explore your own mind and life without depending on inherited beliefs, then Buddhism offers a radically fresh perspective. It doesn't tell you what to believe, it shows you how to look. In this journey, we'll explore how the Buddha viewed existence and truth, not as abstract ideas, but as direct experiences to be understood here and now. His teachings invite us to wake up from our illusions and take responsibility for our own lives. They offer not faith, but clarity, not dogma, but freedom. In the traditional sense, Buddhism doesn't claim a monopoly on truth. It doesn't ask for submission or devotion to a higher power. Instead, it directs attention inward, to observe the workings of our minds, the root of suffering, and the nature of liberation. Its core principle is awareness, watching carefully, understanding deeply, and living wisely. Let's begin with one of the most striking differences: the absence of a creator God. The Buddha neither confirmed nor denied the existence of such a being. Instead, he pointed out that belief in an all-powerful deity doesn't resolve our inner turmoil. It may offer temporary comfort, but it doesn't help us face the root of our suffering. He explained that the idea of God is often a projection of human insecurity, a psychological refuge created by the mind when confronted with uncertainty, pain, and the need for control. This projection, the Buddha taught, might reflect more about our own fears and desires than any ultimate truth. Only when we drop such illusions, whether about God or about a permanent self, can we begin to understand the nature of reality as it truly is. Likewise, the idea of an eternal soul or self is carefully deconstructed in Buddhism. While most religions hold that there's an unchanging you that lives on after death, Buddhism suggests that this is a misconception. The self, as we perceive it, is not a fixed entity, but a process, a stream of thoughts, sensations, and habits arising and passing away. We cling to the idea of a solid I because it gives us a sense of stability. But this very clinging, the Buddha said, is the source of our suffering. Instead of a soul, what exists is interdependence, a dynamic interplay of causes and conditions. Everything we are is connected to everything else. Nothing arises in isolation. This view may seem abstract at first, but it has profound implications. The boundary between me and not me is not as clear as we think. In realizing this, we start to feel less isolated, less grasping, and more open to life as it is. Buddhism does not offer eternal life or divine favor. What it does offer is a path, a method to understand our minds, see through illusions, and live with clarity and compassion. It is a way of living, a training of awareness, a continuous unfolding, rather than a belief to be held. In this video journey, we will explore what it means to walk this path, not as disciples of doctrine, but as travelers of truth. We will see how the Buddha's insights, far from being mystical or abstract, speak directly to the dilemmas of modern life. In doing so, we will uncover not just ideas, but a way of being that brings us closer to peace, not through belief, but through insight. To walk the Buddhist path is to engage in a kind of radical honesty. It means asking ourselves, what is truly happening here and now, beneath the stories we tell, beneath the identities we protect? Buddhism begins not with a doctrine, but with a question. Why do we suffer? And from that question unfolds a map, not a divine commandment, but a guide for investigation. This map is found in what the Buddha called the Four Noble Truths. But again, even this phrase can be misleading. These truths are not beliefs to adopt. They are observations, like stepping stones placed on a river, inviting us to test them for ourselves. The first noble truth simply states that there is suffering, dukkha. Life, as we live it with clinging, contains dissatisfaction. No matter how much we achieve, acquire, or control, there's a subtle restlessness, an unease. Even in moments of joy, there is the shadow of impermanence, the anxiety that it won't last. Buddhism does not say life is only suffering. It says that suffering is an unavoidable part of conditioned existence, unless we understand its root. The second noble truth identifies the cause, craving, or tanha. This is not just wanting pleasure or avoiding pain. It's a deeper pattern of resistance and grasping. We crave certainty, permanence, identity. We grasp at what feels good, and we push away what feels bad. In doing so, we create a tension, a war with life as it is. This tension is suffering. The third noble truth is revolutionary. If craving is the cause, then its cessation, nirodha, is possible. We are not condemned to suffering. Liberation is not found by adding anything new, but by letting go of what binds us. This isn't a theoretical liberation. It's the direct experience of freedom that arises when the mind is no longer caught in clinging and aversion. The fourth noble truth lays out the path to this freedom, the Noble Eightfold Path. It is not a commandment list, but a holistic way of living, training in wisdom, ethics, and mental discipline. It speaks of right view, right intention, right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Each step supports the others, like spokes of a wheel turning together. Notice again, there is no mention of belief in gods, no requirement to worship, no demand to accept a cosmology. What matters is your mind, your actions, your direct experience. The Eightfold Path is not about conforming to an ideology. It is about seeing clearly and living wisely. This emphasis on direct experience is what makes Buddhism so radically experiential. The Buddha often warned his students not to accept his teachings out of reverence, but to test them like a goldsmith tests metal, by cutting, scraping, and burning it. He said, "Do not go by hearsay, by tradition, or by sacred texts. Only when you see for yourselves that something is skillful, that it leads to welfare and happiness, only then should you accept it and live by it." Such a statement would be unthinkable from the founder of most religions. But the Buddha was not concerned with founding a religion. He was concerned with awakening. And awakening, in Buddhist terms, is not a mystical experience to be chased, nor a status to be claimed. It is simply the clear seeing of things as they are, impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. When this is truly seen, not just intellectually, but with the whole heart, then clinging drops away, and peace remains. This doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. On the contrary, Buddhism cultivates profound compassion. But this compassion doesn't arise from duty or dogma. It arises naturally when we realize that others are not separate from ourselves. Their suffering is our suffering. Their joy is our joy. When the illusion of a separate self fades, love is what remains. Buddhist practice, then, is not aimed at becoming someone new. It is aimed at seeing through the illusion of who we think we are. It is less about self-improvement and more about self-transcendence. Not becoming better, but becoming freer. In this light, meditation is not a religious ritual, but a laboratory of awareness. It is where we observe the workings of the mind, its habits, its restlessness, its constant push and pull. We begin to see how much of our suffering is self-created, how often we react instead of respond, how rarely we are truly present. Through mindfulness, we return to the present moment, not as a slogan, but as a homecoming. The present is not always pleasant, but it is always real. And in reality, there is clarity. There is room to breathe. There is no need to escape because we are no longer trapped. This is the essence of Buddhist teaching. We suffer because we are asleep to the truth of impermanence, to the truth of non-self, to the truth of craving. We wake up not by believing differently, but by seeing differently. So again, we return to our question, is Buddhism a religion? If religion means devotion to dogma, submission to divine will, and adherence to rituals as ends in themselves, then Buddhism is not a religion. But if religion is the sincere search for truth, the deep inquiry into life's meaning, and a commitment to live with wisdom and compassion, then Buddhism is more than a religion. It is a path of awakening. There is something quietly revolutionary in this vision of Buddhism. It asks us not to follow, but to inquire, not to believe, but to observe. It doesn't promise salvation through faith, but points instead to liberation through understanding. That liberation, however, is not distant or abstract. It is not found in a future life, nor reserved for saints and sages. It is immediate, available to anyone who begins to look clearly, who dares to stop running from pain and pleasure long enough to see their source. But to see clearly is not easy. It takes discipline, it takes humility, and above all, it takes courage, the courage to face ourselves without flinching, to meet our fear, our anger, our sorrow, without hiding behind explanations or distractions. This is where Buddhist practice becomes more than philosophy. It becomes a way of living. The teachings are not meant to stay on a page or even in our heads. They are meant to be walked, breathed, embodied. That's why Buddhism places such emphasis on sila, ethical conduct. Ethics in Buddhism is not about divine commandments or cosmic reward. It is about recognizing cause and effect. When we act from greed, hatred, or delusion, suffering follows not because we are punished, but because those states naturally create pain. When we act from generosity, kindness, and clarity, peace follows, not as a reward, but as a natural result. This ethical dimension is essential. Meditation without ethics can easily become escapism, or worse, a way to spiritually bypass our responsibilities. Real insight is never separate from compassion. The deeper we see into the nature of our own mind, the more we understand the minds of others. We no longer need to judge. We understand. We no longer need to control. We trust. And this trust gives rise to another key quality in Buddhism: equanimity. Not indifference, but balance. A mind that is not swayed by gain or loss, praise or blame, pleasure or pain. A mind that sees clearly, feels fully, and remains steady. Equanimity is often misunderstood. In a world addicted to extremes, to outrage and ecstasy, a calm mind can look cold. But in reality, it is the ground from which true compassion arises. When we are no longer caught in our own reactivity, we can respond to the world with wisdom. We can care without clinging, act without aggression, love without fear. This is not a state reserved for monastics or mystics. It is a capacity available to all of us, here and now. The teachings of Buddhism are universal because suffering is universal, and so is the capacity to awaken. We do not need to become Buddhists to benefit from these teachings. In fact, the Buddha never asked anyone to become a Buddhist. He invited people to see for themselves, to live ethically, to cultivate mindfulness, to develop understanding, and to let these practices speak for themselves. In that sense, Buddhism is not something we believe in. It is something we do. It is not a badge to wear, but a mirror to look into. It doesn't ask us to worship. It asks us to wake up. An awakening is not a one-time event. It is a process, a path, a practice. There are glimpses, then forgetting, insight, then old habits. But slowly, the momentum of awareness builds. Slowly, the roots of suffering loosen. Slowly, we begin to live not from fear, but from presence. That presence is not mystical. It is the simple, radical act of being here, now, of touching life directly, without a filter, of meeting each moment with curiosity instead of control. That is the heart of Buddhist practice, and that is why, ultimately, Buddhism defies categories. It is not a religion, though it has religious forms. It is not a philosophy, though it contains profound thought. It is not a psychology, though it maps the mind with precision. It is a path, a way to live, a way to see, a way to be free. So the next time someone asks, "Is Buddhism a religion?" perhaps the most honest answer is, it depends. It depends on how you hold it, how you walk it, how you live it. But perhaps a better answer is to simply smile and invite them to sit quietly for a moment, to feel the breath, to listen to the heart, to notice, without judgment, the thoughts and sensations passing through awareness. In that moment, they will have begun to understand what cannot be explained. And in that moment, Buddhism begins, not as a belief, but as a direct encounter with reality.